are landlords just going to go with the cheapest improvements, like tick box exercise, or will they, potentially do more work which has a better ROI and it might cost more, but it's actually future-proofing their property? I think it's quite interesting because we did an analysis on the previous proposals, and we found if it was just a box ticking exercise, there'd be a net cost of the economy of about 5 billion. But if landlords were supported and encouraged to do the best ROI and future-proofed, it could be actually a net gain of the economy of about 5 billion. So, that's what we're sort of looking at. What's your opinion on that?
So again, I think mirroring what Chloe was saying there, I think education is really important here. If we treat this just as compliance, it's going to be a disaster in the future. Assets are going to be devalued more quickly, and you're not going to get the ROI out of the measures that you're putting in. I think probably the best thing to look at and the best thing to talk to landlords and anyone that's thinking of retrofitting their property is going to be, if you're doing this just for achieving a C, then yes, they're going to look for the cheapest methods and the cheapest way of doing so. If you're doing this to achieve that C, but also to improve the price of your asset, to future proof, which is the better way to go, then you're going to be looking at more than the C. You're going to be doing what you can now. As with all of these, everything is going to be, any sort of energy improvement that you make, any sort of retrofitting that you do, is going to be paying dividends, and there's going to be an ROI there. There's nothing, even with sort of fabric, even with putting in LEDs, there's a cost to that, and you will save money in the future. So it's important, I think, to look at these things as investments rather than just pure capital costs, and to act in that way. So I think there'll be a mix, but I think the pressure is on us to make sure that people have the education that these aren't just things that you have to do for compliance. They're actually beneficial in the long run, and it's better to do them now while we have some capacity to do them than in the future when you've run the risk of prices being marked up, you not being able to do this in time, and everything kind of pushes it, sort of bulges at the seams with our delivery. So it's an interesting question, but I think it depends primarily on the landlord.
I think that's an interesting point there, is education, because it depends where you are as a landlord. If you're like a new entrant, you might be thinking, well, what's the next regulation coming in 10 years? I want to be holding this asset for quite a while. Are they going to want to upgrade the heat? Shall I just do it now and get out of the way and it's future-proofed? But if you're like, maybe well into retirement and it's just a bit of retirement income, you're not sure how long you're going to be having it for, you might just not care and just literally tip, right, let's get me to a C. Yeah. So, but if you are that maybe younger or looking to hold that asset for longer, it's about getting that education across of you can do this now and it's actually cheaper over the longer run, rather than in terms of future proofing, rather than just doing the tip box exercise. No, sorry, you had a comment there.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you actually look at the EPCs that are being done because of upgrading, it is showing that it is being done largely to get to a C. The amount doing it above that are doing and getting it up to a B, he's really not there, but up to a B, it's not falling through. It's such a small percentage because they're not being asked to do it, or the communication from the government is not to increase your asset. It is not to future-proof or to look at it from financing. The government requirement is to get it to C so that you can continue to let to a tenant. Yeah. That is what they are actually performing and going through. So if nobody's educating them on what can be done, the other thing they've got on the other side, which is, I get Chloe is absolutely right with the changes with the Renters' Rights Act, everything is around having a good tenant. The other thing they've got sat there at the back of their mind is there were people that were told 10, 15 years ago to do spray insulation that are now finding that they cannot be financed. Yeah. There are people in Scotland who were told that one of the HEM measures that were being put in was to put in underfloor heating, and now they've got people coming out saying that this has its health problems, having large underfloor heating through properties. So they're almost, what do I do? I think there are always going to be people who will game the system, who will go and put one solar panel on with a battery intake that will say, I've now put solar on it and can do it. There will be people who put the panels on, don't look at where it's facing, and decide to use the percentage of roof metric to be able to do as the calculation to just get by it.
Yeah.
But they're small. When we're actually seeing people doing this, the majority of landlords out there are wanting, yes, I have to meet a C, but I want to do this in the most beneficial way for my property, and as Chloe did highlight, for the future earnings. We're not seeing that yet. We're not seeing a huge disparity between somebody who's in a B or a C versus somebody who's in an E or an F, because we've got too much of a housing crisis. A tenant doesn't have the luxury of saying, you know what, I'm not going to take this property because it's an E. I'm looking for a C. We've not got that luxury. But there was a question that came up in the Q&A, and it does talk to this, that where do we see this going? Will the retrofits, we cannot not expect 24 billion being put into the private rented sector to do all of these initiatives and it not have an upward pressure effect on rental prices. But that is going to happen, and it's not a double-edged sword, because you can't say, because of supply and demand, because of the needs, that we're not going to address our current aging properties and their energy efficiency, or we're not going to look at fuel poverty situations that we're actually putting people into because we're worried about upward pressures. I think they are two things that we shouldn't link together. There's a need to upgrade properties. There's a need from an energy point of view and our consumption for us to address that by making our properties more energy efficient. The secondary effect of what that may have to the asset and rental yields is something that the government will need to look at. It's not for the retrofit industry, I think, to worry about that.
Yeah, and I do think, there could be some sort of mechanism to say, how much can you put your rents up by in order to recoup this? Like, landlord's going to gouge it.
You mean rent controls? That's completely out, Luke. And to be honest, rent controls from a finance and from a lender's point of view would be catastrophic on where they could go innovative wise to try and assist with this.
And that's a good
point.
So
that's why the government has really held away. They've been very firm on a no to rent controls, because they see that what would do to stifle how the rest of the industry assists when they've got no coffers to put money forward. They need other initiatives to help, and that would be the shortest way to shut finance down if you limit the potential return from that asset.
That's a really good point. We have sort of run out of time. Chloe, have you got any more comments or sort of any input on what we just said?
Yeah, I guess just to tag on to that, I completely agree. And I also think this is why, to reiterate our point about education, the reason for doing this, rather than just tick box compliance, is to actually benefit tenants. Because if you retrofit to the level where the bills authentically go down, and we've seen examples of properties in this country today, in rainy, cloudy England, where you'd think solar panels don't work that well, but there are examples of zero bills properties, or properties producing a surplus. And I think if a higher rent is advertised, but alongside this property either has zero bills or very low bills, that's not actually adding pressure on the tenant, that's benefiting the tenant, and it's allowing the landlord to reap some of that benefit as well, because we know that the split incentive problem for retrofitting is a really big barrier for landlords, that they invest all this capital in their property and then they don't actually see the day-to-day returns. So I think and more communication around this, more data on valuation uplift, so that this is done properly and not just as something to get to a minimum of C and then forget about it, because I think it has real benefits for tenants, for landlords, for everybody.
And I think from, we're quite a major supplier of retrofit. We work with a number of lenders, nationally. I think, contractors needed to have their own standards, like not using the percentage, like just put on a solar panels on a north-facing roof and just doing a tick box exercise that way, or just put one solar panel on. Like, contractors need to be like, no, we're not doing that, sorry, or have certain standards, because they will have more demand than there is supply, so they can potentially pick and choose what jobs they do. So it's about, this is a standard we're doing, if you don't want to do it, then there's plenty of other landlords where we're going to be working with, sort of thing. So
I do think as well that sort of approach to retrofitting, that is a huge risk, because as we've changed to EPC, the EPC calculation methods to SAP 10, we're looking at the home energy model coming in. If there is a big uptick in people gaming this system, that's going to be fixed, and you'd hope that there's going to be no advantage there. So, you know, I'd stay away from any of that behaviour. If that's a big thing that people are doing, it's not going to last very long.
Yeah.
I wholly agree with that, and I think the home energy model is something probably landlords should be aware of, in that it is a big move in the goalpost coming down the track on what actually constitutes an A or B property. So many properties that are A or B today would probably be downgraded to C or below under the home energy model, because it is so much more focused on real-time building performance and a more accurate more up-to-date set of measures. So I think this is something that could really impact your decision on whether to act now or later. I know a lot of people are sitting on their hands because they're thinking, oh, maybe I could get exempt, and you know, I don't want to invest anything that doesn't meet that kind of minimum capital spend. But there is a reason to just act now, because you can secure your certificate you know, now, right before the goalposts really shift and you've got a much higher bar to meet to get to that C.